In the rugged frontier town of Snake River, Violet Evans refuses to surrender her dreams to the narrow expectations of those around her. While suitors crowd her doorstep with unwanted proposals and bruised egos, Violet fights for a future built on books, words, and independence. Then she meets James Keating, a quiet horseman whose strength lies not in dominance, but in respect. As jealousy stirs and danger follows, their growing bond is tested by men threatened by a woman with ambition. But in James, Violet finds something rare, a love that empowers her, not cages her, and a future worth fighting for. The frontier town of Snake River, Wyoming, was a place where dust clung to boots, gossip traveled faster than the stagecoach, and a woman with ambition was treated like an oddity rather than a blessing. But Violet Evans had never cared much for opinions. She cared for stories, ink, and the quiet promise that life could be more than the narrow future others tried to hand her. Every morning, as the sun painted the sky a soft gold, Violet walked down Main Street with her chin lifted just enough to remind herself she didn't belong in anyone's shadow. Her deep auburn hair swayed behind her, catching the light like copper threads, and her boots tapped a confident rhythm against the wooden walkways. Men glanced at her, women whispered about her, and children stared with wide curiosity. Violet paid them no mind. She wasn't trying to be rebellious, she was simply trying to be herself. Where most women in Snake River married by 19 and had children by 20, Violet at 25 had different plans. Her dream was simple to her but outrageous to everyone else. She wanted to open a bookshop, a place where stories could breathe and travelers could rest their hearts for a spell. She also longed for a corner desk near a window, where she could finally write her own stories instead of just dreaming them. But dreams, especially in a frontier town, were fragile things, and Violet guarded hers fiercely. The suitors, however, refused to understand that. Every eligible man for miles seemed to treat her as a challenge, a prize, or a puzzle he believed he could solve. Clarence Whitmore, the banker's son, strutted around her with the confidence of a rooster. Wyatt Ferguson, the loud cattleman, never missed a chance to boast about the size of his herd or his future wealth. Even the town deputy had declared she needed a steady hand to guide her. Violet brushed them off with polite smiles and firmer rejections. But sometimes, when she lay awake at night, she wondered if there was truly a man in this world who could understand her heart without trying to cage it. That question lingered until the day she met James Keating. It happened on a warm summer afternoon, the kind where heat shimmered over the fields and the scent of sage drifted lazily through town. Violet was returning from the general store with a stack of books tied with twine in her arms, donations from Mrs. Pemberley, the only elderly woman in town who believed knowledge was a treasure, not a threat. As Violet stepped into the street, a horse suddenly spooked, jerking sideways. The rider tightened the reins with expert calm, coaxing the animal back under control before it could barrel into her. "You all right, miss?" the man asked, his voice low, gentle, and steady. Violet blinked at him, startled but unhurt. The sun framed him from behind, casting a warm glow around his shoulders. He was tall, lean, and dressed plainly in worn leather boots, a faded shirt, and a hat that had seen many miles. But it wasn't his appearance that struck her, it was his eyes. Quiet. Observant. Kind. "Yes, yes, I'm fine," she said softly, adjusting the books in her arms. The man dismounted with an easy grace. "Let me help you with those." "No, thank you," Violet replied out of habit, used to men who insisted they knew better. But James Keating didn't insist. He simply nodded. "All right then." That alone surprised her enough to pause. Most men in Snake River would have pushed, argued, or grabbed the books anyway under the excuse of helping. But this stranger simply accepted her boundary, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "You're new in town," Violet observed. He offered a small smile. "Just arrived this week. I'm working at the south end of the Keating Ranch." "Keating Ranch?" Violet repeated. "Are you related to Henry Keating?" "He was my uncle," James said quietly. "Passed a few months back." I've come to settle his affairs, help with the horses, and see if Snake River has a place for me." Something in his voice suggested he wasn't sure it did. Violet shifted the books in her arms, trying to get a better hold. One slipped, and before she could catch it, James moved with quick reflexes, snatching it gently before it hit the ground. He didn't make a show of it. Didn't laugh. Didn't tease. He simply handed it back. "Thank you," she said, a bit breathless from more than just the near fall. "You're welcome, Miss Evans. Violet Evans." He tipped his hat. "James Keating." Their introduction should have ended there, but something held her in place. Perhaps it was the softness in his tone, or the way he made no effort to look at her as a conquest. His gaze was level, respectful, almost thoughtful. "Are you fond of books?" Violet asked, surprised by the question spilling from her without planning. James nodded slowly. "I read when I can. Mostly at night when the ranch work is done. Helps quiet the mind." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Most cowboys I know prefer cards or whiskey. I've had enough of both in earlier years," he admitted. "Books are gentler." Violet smiled, really smiled. And James looked quietly stunned, as though he hadn't expected such softness offered his way. Their conversation drifted easily after that. He asked about the town, not in the gossiping way newcomers often did but with genuine curiosity. She told him about the river, the old church, the mercantile, and finally, hesitantly, about her dream of opening a bookshop. "Sounds like something this town needs," he said. "Most folks would disagree." "Well," James replied, "most folks are afraid of anything that doesn't fit in the palm of their hand." She stared at him, stunned again. How could a man she'd known for minutes understand her more clearly than suitors who'd chased her for years? Before she could respond, Clarence Whitmore strutted across the street with the swagger of a man certain he was superior. His smile instantly soured when he saw Violet speaking to James. "Miss Evans," Clarence said sharply, "you shouldn't be speaking alone with strangers. It isn't proper." Violet opened her mouth to respond, but James spoke first, calmly, firmly, and without the slightest hint of aggression. "She's not alone. She's standing in broad daylight, in the middle of town. And she's capable of deciding who she speaks to." Clarence bristled. "I don't recall asking your opinion, cowboy." "No," James said, meeting his stare evenly, "I don't believe you did." Clarence huffed, tried to regain dignity, and walked off with a muttered warning. Violet looked at James, half expecting him to smirk or boast. Instead, he simply lifted a shoulder in a modest shrug. "Didn't mean to cause trouble," he said. "You didn't," Violet replied softly. "You simply treated me like a person. That's rare enough." James offered her a small, humble smile, one that warmed her more than the summer sun ever could. When they parted ways, Violet walked toward home with her heart beating faster than usual. Not because he had rescued her. Not because he defended her. But because, for the first time in a long time, she had met a man who looked at her dreams not as obstacles, but as part of who she was. And that, she realized, was far more dangerous, and far more beautiful, than any of the suitors who chased her. In the dusty streets of Snake River, where her hopes often felt too big, Violet Evans felt something unfamiliar blooming inside her. Possibility. And it carried the quiet strength and gentle eyes of James Keating. The weeks slipped by with the gentle rhythm of summer turning to fall, and Violet Evans soon realized that James Keating had woven himself into her life so gradually, so naturally, that she could no longer imagine Snake River without him. He didn't arrive with loud declarations, nor did he push his way into her world the way other men had tried. He simply showed up. Steady as sunrise, patient as a horseman who understood the language of silence. Every morning, she saw him riding through town before heading to the Keating ranch, the reins loose in his hand as though he spoke to his horse more than he ever spoke to people. And every afternoon, he passed by her small rented room at the boarding house to carry lumber, paint, and shelves she needed for her dream, the bookshop she was finally building. Not because he insisted. Not because he wanted credit. But because he wanted her dreams to have a place to breathe. At first, Violet felt uncertain. She wasn't accustomed to accepting help, especially from a man who didn't assume helping meant owning something in return. But James always waited for her permission. He always asked her vision first. He always let her lead. And that, more than anything, showed Violet the quiet strength of his heart. But the rest of Snake River didn't welcome the growing closeness with such grace. Rumors began first, whispers of Violet being claimed by the new Horseman, gossip about her spending too much time with a man, and mutterings from the old townsmen that women with dreams were trouble enough without romance involved. Worst of all were the men she had rejected over the years, especially Clarence Whitmore and Wyatt Ferguson. Their pride shriveled, their egos bruised, they became determined to sabotage anything she and James built. Wyatt spread lies that James was a drifter with a criminal past. Clarence warned townsfolk that Violet's bookshop would be a den of idle ideas, unfit for a proper community. Some folks believed them. Some simply liked watching a woman with ambition struggle. But James never responded in anger. He didn't confront the gossips, didn't boast, didn't throw punches. He simply continued helping her, quietly, steadfastly, like a man who knew his worth didn't depend on their approval. "What do they want from me?" Violet whispered one evening as she and James sanded wooden shelves inside her soon-to-open shop. "Control," James replied, brushing sawdust from his hands. "They don't understand a woman who doesn't bow to a man's pride." "And you?" Violet asked softly, fear and hope tangled in her voice. "What do you understand?" He paused, resting against the half-finished shelf, eyes steady on her. "I understand that your dreams are bigger than this town," he said. "And anyone who truly cares about you should make room for them, not cage them." Her breath caught. No man had ever spoken about her dreams with such reverence. "I'm not used to someone believing in me," she whispered. James's gaze softened. "Then it's about time someone did." Their conversation lingered in the air long after the words faded, weaving itself into Violet's heart like a promise she wasn't sure how to accept yet, but desperately wanted to. Tensions worsened in the coming days. Clarence confronted James in front of the saloon, accusing him of stealing Violet's affections. Wyatt threatened to ruin the grand opening of her shop. Even the deputy warned James to mind his place. Snake River was small, and small towns had a way of tightening like a noose around those who dared step outside the expectations set for them. One chilly evening, Violet found James repairing a fence rail behind the shop. She hesitated before approaching. "James, you don't have to keep doing this," she said gently. "All this trouble." "It's not trouble," he said, cutting her off softly. "Not for me. But these men, they hate you because of me." "No," he shook his head. "They hate me because I don't see you as something to be claimed." Her heart trembled. "I see you, Violet," he continued. "Just as you are. And I stand beside you because I choose to, not because I expect you to choose me back." Tears stung the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming gentleness of it all. She didn't kiss him then. She didn't even take his hand. But something inside her cracked open, a space she'd kept boarded shut for years, afraid of what letting someone in might cost her. The storm broke the night before her shop was set to open. Wyatt and a few others gathered outside, shouting insults and threats. They accused Violet of forgetting her place, of choosing a nobody ranch hand over respectable men, of thinking she was too good for the town that allowed her to stay. James stepped outside before she could. "I'm not looking for a fight," he said calmly. "That's good," Clarence sneered. "Because you'll lose it." "You don't own her," James replied. "And your pride isn't worth hurting her dreams." Wyatt lunged. A fist flew. James dodged once, twice, until finally a blow caught him across the jaw. Violet cried out, but before she could rush forward, James held up a hand. "No," he said. "I won't hurt them." That only enraged the suitors further. More fists. More anger. More wounded pride. But James didn't fight back. He simply stood like a wall, refusing to be moved, refusing to raise a hand in violence that would only justify their hatred. Eventually the deputy arrived and scattered the troublemakers, but by then Violet was already kneeling beside James, her trembling hands brushing blood from his lip. "Why didn't you fight?" she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "Because you're worth more than a bruised ego," he murmured. "And I won't become the kind of man they are." She cupped his face, her voice breaking. "What if they come back?" "They won't," he said softly. "And even if they do, I'm not going anywhere." Something in her heart shattered. Something else blossomed. Before she realized it, she kissed him, a soft, trembling kiss that tasted of fear, hope, and every unspoken word between them. James held her gently, as though she were something precious but never fragile. And in that moment, Violet Evans knew. This was the man who understood her. Not because he wanted her, but because he believed in her. The bookshop opened the next morning. Most of the town came, some to support, some out of curiosity, a few out of spite, but Violet didn't care. She stood at the counter, radiant and proud, with James at her side. Not behind her. Not in front. Beside her. The shelves gleamed, the books lined up like little soldiers ready to share their worlds, and sunlight poured through the windows she had polished to a shine. Children gathered with excitement. Women whispered with envy and admiration. Men quieted as they realized Violet Evans wasn't a woman seeking permission, she was a woman choosing her own life. And James Keating was a part of it. Weeks later, when James finally asked her if she'd consider building a life with him, slowly, gently, in her own time, Violet didn't hesitate. "Yes," she whispered, smiling through tears. "Yes, James. With you, I can dream even bigger." They married under the cottonwoods behind the bookshop, surrounded by friends, laughter, and shelves full of the stories that had brought them together. In Snake River, Violet Evans found more than love. She found a partner. A home. A heart that matched her own beat for beat. And a quiet horseman who changed everything, not with force, not with pride, but with the steady, unwavering devotion of a man who believed in her dreams as much as she did.